The classroom was silent as the alien cadets entered one by one, their tall frames moving with careful steps, their eyes shining with bright colors that showed excitement and nervous energy. They carried strange notebooks made of metal sheets and glowing ink. They sat down in curved chairs that floated slightly above the floor. The room was built with smooth walls that pulsed with faint light. Every corner seemed alive with technology that hummed like a quiet song. The lesson today was important, maybe the most important they had ever faced, for written on the large screen at the front of the class were words that made their hearts beat faster. How to kill a human. The words glowed in sharp silver letters. The alien teacher stood tall and serious, his skin dark like stone, his arms long and thin, his eyes bright yellow with no pupils. He wore a robe of shifting patterns that seemed to ripple like water. He raised one long finger and pointed at the glowing words. He spoke in a deep voice that echoed around the room. Today, you will learn the secrets of defeating the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. He said, today you will study the weaknesses of a human race. The cadets shifted in their floating chairs. Some whispered to each other, their voices low and filled with curiosity. One cadet, a young one with blue scales, leaned closer to his friend and asked quietly, "Are they really so dangerous? I thought they were small and weak." The friend shook his head. "I heard stories," he said. "I heard they are strong in ways we cannot measure, but the teacher says they can be killed. We must learn." At the very back of the classroom sat a figure unlike the others. His chair did not float, but stood firmly on the ground. He was smaller than the aliens, his skin pale, his hair dark, his eyes calm. He wore simple clothes, no glowing robes, no armor, no strange jewelry. He looked like nothing special. Yet there was something about the way he sat, silent and steady, his hands folded in his lap, his face unreadable. He was a human. The cadets glanced at him, but quickly looked away. They had been told not to disturb him. They had been told he was only there to observe, to listen quietly to the lesson. He had agreed to be part of this experiment, part of this training. His presence was meant to help the aliens understand better. But still, it made them nervous. Having a real human there while they were being taught how to kill one felt dangerous. The teacher began to speak again, his voice slow and heavy. Humans are clever, but their bodies are fragile. Their bones can break, their skin can tear, their hearts are soft if you strike here. He pointed to a glowing diagram of a human body. They will fall quickly. The cadets nodded and took notes, their glowing pens moving fast across their metal sheets. One cadet raised a hand. "Teacher, is it true they cannot heal fast like we do?" The teacher nodded. "They heal slowly. Slower than us, much slower than most creatures in the galaxy." The cadets whispered again, excitement growing. "This will be easy," they said. "Humans are not so special," they said. But the human in the back did not move. He did not speak. He only watched, his eyes sharp and calm like he had seen this many times before. The alien teacher continued, "You must also know their minds are strong, but can be tricked. They are curious, too curious. They fall for traps. They are emotional. If you use fear or anger, you can control them. Remember this always." The cadets wrote down every word, their eyes glowing brighter with each line of weakness. They believed they were learning a great secret, a powerful truth. The human in the back leaned slightly forward. His chair creaked softly. No one noticed his lips moved, just a little, like he was whispering something to himself. But no sound came out. He only smiled, a small, quiet smile. One of the cadets, a tall one with green skin and horns, raised his voice. "Teacher, if humans are so weak, why are they feared across the stars? Why do many worlds speak of them with respect and fear?" The teacher paused, his yellow eyes narrowing. He answered, "Because humans are unpredictable, because they adapt quickly, because they do not surrender easily. But remember, even the strongest enemy has weaknesses that can be used." The class nodded, though doubt flickered in some of their eyes. The human still said nothing. His hand stayed folded, his gaze fixed on the glowing words at the front of the room. How to kill a human. His eyes did not show fear or anger, only patience and a strange, quiet confidence. The cadets leaned closer to each other, whispering again, "Do you think he is listening to all this? Do you think he feels insulted?" One asked. Another shook his head. "He looks calm, too calm. It is strange. Maybe he does not care. Maybe he already knows what the teacher will say." They nodded, but deep inside a seed of unease began to grow. The teacher spoke louder, his voice filling the room. "Humans are strong in spirit, but their bodies betray them. Their hearts can stop, their lungs can fail, they bleed, they grow tired, they break down. If you push long enough, if you strike the right place, you will win." The cadets scribbled harder, their notes glowing with more lines and marks. At the back, the human finally shifted his eyes, turned to the cadets one by one. They felt his gaze like a heavy weight on their shoulders, though he still smiled softly. The silence from him was louder than any word. The lesson continued. The diagrams showed weak points. The teacher explained strategies. The cadets filled pages with glowing ink. But with each moment that passed, the human's quiet presence seemed stronger, as if his silence spoke louder than the teacher's words, as if he was waiting patiently for something the aliens could not yet see. The classroom air grew tense. The hum of the walls felt louder, the glow of the diagrams brighter. The cadets glanced more often at the silent man at the back, each glance filled with unease, but no one dared to ask him anything. Not yet. The words on the screen kept shining: how to kill a human, but the truth of the lesson had not yet been spoken, not by the teacher, not by the cadets, and not yet by the human who waited. The classroom lights dimmed, and the great screen at the front shifted to show a glowing image of a human body floating in mid-air made of blue light, with lines pointing to every part of it. The alien teacher raised his long hand and spoke in his deep voice again. These are the weak points of the human form, and you must know them well if you ever face one in battle, he said, his voice carrying heavy weight around the room. The cadets leaned forward, their glowing pens ready, their eyes wide with eagerness. They wanted to write down every secret that would make them feel stronger. The teacher pointed to the chest of the glowing human. Here, he said, the heart beats fast, but it is soft. It can be pierced with sharp weapons. It can be crushed with strong hands. If the heart is stopped, the human falls quickly. The cadets scribbled with fast strokes on their metal pages, their glowing ink shining brighter. The human at the back remained still. He breathed slow, his face calm. He made no sound. He only listened, as if every word was part of a story he had heard many times before. The teacher moved his long finger to the head of the glowing body. Here, he said, the skull is thin, and the brain inside can be harmed. Their eyes can be blinded, their ears can be hurt, their mouth can be silent. Strike the head, and you strike their mind. The cadets whispered to each other, their voices filled with pride. This is simple. They said, we can do this easily, they said. But again, the human in the back only smiled faintly, his eyes steady like stone. The teacher then pointed lower to the legs and arms. He spoke, they're strong with muscles, but those muscles can tear their bones, can snap their joint, can fail. If you strike here, you take away their movement. And once they cannot move, they cannot fight. The cadets nodded fast, their pens scratching quickly on their glowing pages, every note making them feel as if victory was already in their hands. The human leaned slightly forward, his fingers tapping once on the table. The sound small, but sharp. It made a few cadets look back at him. For a moment, his eyes caught theirs, and they felt something heavy in their chests. They quickly looked away, pretending to keep writing. The teacher spoke again. Their breath can be stolen. Their lungs are fragile. They need air. If you choke them or block their air, they cannot survive. Without it, their blood carries life. If too much blood is lost, they grow weak and soon fall. Their skin is soft. It can be cut, burned, frozen, pierced. Remember all of this. Remember that humans look strong, but are fragile creatures. The cadets began to laugh, quietly, their whispers now filled with boldness. One said, they are not gods, they are weak. Another said, all the stories must be lies, they cannot be so feared. If they are this easy to break, another added, we could take one down without much effort, surely. But still the human sat calm, silent, his expression unchanged, his silence louder than all their laughter. The teacher raised his voice again. Do not mistake weakness for defeat. He warned, though, they're fragile, they're also clever, and cleverness can make weakness into strength. The cadets listened, but only half believed, for their minds were already dancing with the thought of easy victory, their glowing notes filled with weak spots. They thought they had learned everything they needed. The human shifted again, just a little. He leaned back this time, his arms crossing over his chest, his eyes no longer on the glowing body at the front, but on the cadets themselves. He studied them one by one, and though he did not speak, every alien who felt his gaze turned nervous. Their pen slowed, their whispers grew softer, as if they could feel a storm coming, but could not explain why. The teacher drew new lines across the glowing human figure, showing patterns and arrows. These are the methods of attack. He said, strike fast, strike hard, and never give them time to think. If you give them time, they will adapt, they will turn the battle against you. So remember, speed and surprise are your best weapons against them. The cadets nodded and wrote, but again their eyes flicked toward the human, who still had not said a single word. Some began to wonder why he was there, why he listened in silence when the entire lesson was about his kind. Was he angry Was he amused? Was he waiting for something? One cadet, braver than the rest, whispered to the one beside him, "Maybe he is testing us. Maybe this is part of the lesson." The other cadet shivered and whispered back, "Or maybe he is waiting for us to finish, so he can show us why all this is wrong." They both fell silent. After that, their pens, slowing as doubt, began to creep into their hearts. The teacher did not notice. He kept speaking. "Humans grow tired." He said, "They need food, they need water. Without these, they grow weak. Unlike us, they cannot go long. Without energy, their bodies fail quickly, and they cannot survive. In many worlds, they need air, they need warmth, they need shelter. They are bound by many needs." The cadets filled more lines in their notes, but their glances toward the silent figure at the back grew more frequent. His quiet breathing, his steady eyes, his soft smile, all of it began to weigh on them more than the words of their teacher. The silence felt heavier than the glowing diagrams. The human finally moved again, his hand resting on the table, his fingers tapping. Once more the sound sharp. The cadets flinched, though it was small. They felt it deep, as if it were a warning, as if each soft tap carried more truth than the long lesson before them. The screen still glowed with the body of a human filled with arrows, weak point strategies, weaknesses. Every cadet had pages of shining notes, but none of them felt stronger. None of them felt ready. The silence of the human had turned their excitement into unease. The teacher ended the list with final words. "Remember what you have learned," he said. "Remember these weaknesses, and you will not fail." But as he spoke those last words, the eyes of every cadet were no longer on the screen, no longer on their notes. They were on the human at the back, who had not spoken a single sentence, yet somehow carried the weight of the entire room. The lesson room felt heavy, yet the alien cadets began to grow bold, their pens glowing with all the notes they had written, their minds filling with a picture of humans as fragile creatures with soft skin, weak hearts, and breakable bones. The teacher had told them again and again that humans were dangerous only because of their clever minds, but the long list of weaknesses made the cadets believe that danger was only a story told to frighten them. They felt stronger with every word they had written, stronger with every image drawn on the glowing screen at the front. One tall cadet with green skin and sharp horns on his head stood suddenly from his floating chair, his voice loud with confidence. "Teacher," he said, "I do not see why humans are feared. They are soft, their bones can snap, their lungs can fail, their hearts can be crushed. If I meet one in battle, I will end him before he can even move." The other cadets laughed, clapping their claws and wings, some hissing with excitement. The room echoed with their voices and their pride. The teacher did not laugh. He lifted his long hand, and his yellow eyes narrowed quiet. He said, "Do not underestimate what you do not fully know." His voice deep and sharp, but the cadets did not hear his warning, their minds now burning with pride. The human at the back still sat silent, his face calm, his arms folded across his chest, his eyes watching the cadets, as if each word they spoke was a spark in a fire that would soon consume them. He did not move, he did not speak. His silence weighed heavier than any warning. Another cadet with blue scales and bright silver eyes stood tall and shouted, "I do not fear them. I could defeat 2 or 3 with my claws alone. I could break their bones with one strike." The other cadets shouted with agreement. One added, "They bleed so easy they will fall fast." Another hissed, "Their eyes are weak, one strike, and they are blind." The noise of overconfidence filled the room until it sounded like thunder. The teacher slammed his long hand against the glowing table, the sound ringing across the room, his robe rippling like fire. "Enough," he said, his voice shaking the walls. "You forget too quickly. You hear of weakness, and you think of victory, but weakness is not the same as defeat." The cadets fell quiet, but their eyes still glowed with pride. Their whispers still carried arrogance. One whispered to his friend, "The teacher is too cautious. He fears them too much." Another whispered, "Maybe humans only won battles in the past. Because others were careless, we will not be careless, so we will win." The human finally moved. He leaned forward slowly, his chair creaking under his weight. Though he was smaller than the aliens, the sound made them turn their heads. His eyes glowed, not with color, but with quiet certainty. He looked at each cadet one by one, and though his mouth stayed closed, his gaze carried a question none of them wished to answer. One young cadet with red skin laughed louder, trying to hide his unease. "You see," he said, "he does not speak, he does not deny it, because he knows it is true. He knows we are stronger." His words made others laugh again, but their laughter cracked like thin ice under heavy weight, for even while they laughed, they could not ignore the human's calm eyes staring without fear. The teacher shook his head. Slowly, you see what pride does, he said. Softly, pride blinds you. It makes you think an enemy is weak when in truth you do not understand them. Yet remember what I told you, humans adapt faster than any species. They do not give up. They find a way. Even when wounded, even when cornered, you must never forget this. But his words fell against walls of arrogance. The cadets now believed more in their own strength than in the warnings of their teacher. The human tapped his fingers on the table, once, twice, thrice, the sound sharp and steady. It echoed in the silent corners of the room, each tap a drumbeat that made the cadets shift uneasily, though none would admit it. One whispered, "He is too calm. Why is he not angry?" Another whispered, "Maybe he waits for the right time." The teacher turned back to the glowing screen, showing the fragile human body, yet the truth in the room was no longer on the screen. It was in the silence of the human, who had not spoken yet, who had not moved with anger, yet who had not shown fear yet. The cadets filled the silence with more boasting. One said, "If I fought one, I would tear his arm in a single strike." Another added, "I would crush his chest before he could take another breath." A third hissed, "I would break his skull and silence him forever." The words came sharp, filled with the taste of victory, yet behind each word was a tremor of doubt, small but growing. The human's silence pressed heavier with every boast. He sat like a shadow, like a mountain unshaken by storms, his calm smile never breaking, his eyes burning not with rage, but with patience, as if every moment of arrogance from the cadets was only fuel for what would come later. The teacher spoke again, his voice sharp and heavy. "You are fools if you think humans will fall so easy. You will see one day that every weakness you have written is nothing compared to their will to survive, compared to their hunger to fight, compared to their fire that does not go out. Even when they bleed, even when they break, they rise again." The cadets listened, but their young pride made them blind. They looked at the human and saw only silence, and they mistook silence for fear. The green-horned cadet shouted louder, "I am not afraid. If a human stood here, I would crush him before he could move." His words echoed across the room. But as they echoed, the human at the back finally raised his head higher, his eyes sharp, his arms unfolding slowly, his silence now heavier than stone. Every cadet turned toward him, their arrogance cracking their voices, fading, their pens forgotten, their glowing notes useless. The silence now a storm. And still he did not speak, not yet. The classroom lights shifted again, glowing brighter, as the teacher waved his long hand across the control table, and new diagrams appeared on the great screen. At the front, the glowing figure of a human body now carried arrows and paths, showing movements of attack and strike. The alien cadets leaned forward, once more eager to fill their glowing pages with every secret the teacher offered. Their pride not lessened by his warnings, for they still thought of humans as prey, fragile prey that could be taken down if only one knew the right points. The teacher spoke with slow words, his voice deep like thunder, yet calm like flowing water. "Watch closely," he said, "for this is how you move against them. Strike the chest here from the side, strike the back here, between the bones. Use speed, use surprise. Do not let them breathe. Do not let them think." He shifted the image with a wave of his hand. Now the glowing figure fell with red marks across it, as if already wounded. The cadets gasped with wonder, as if victory had already been placed in their hands. At the back, the human did not move, his chair firm on the ground, his arms folded. Once more, his eyes calm, steady, and bright. He watched the diagrams without blinking. He watched the teacher without flinching. He listened to every word with a silence so heavy that it pressed down on every cadet who dared glance his way. The teacher continued, "Humans fight with passion. They fight with fury, they fight with desperation, but you can break them if you strike first, if you strike fast, if you strike where they do not expect." The cadets scribbled every line, their glowing pens scratching like claws across metal pages, the sound sharp and restless like the beating of 100 small wings in the still air. Yet whispers began again, some cadets looking at the human in the back with unease. One asked quietly to another, "Is it not strange that he says nothing? Should he not defend his kind? Should he not be angry?" The other whispered back, "Maybe he knows we are right. Maybe that is why he is quiet. Maybe he fears what we now know." But even as those whispers were spoken, their voices trembled, for deep in their chests they felt something that was not fear of weakness, but fear of calm strength. The teacher drew more lines across the glowing human figure. Strike the joints, he said. Twist the arms, twist the legs, they will lose balance. Strike the eyes, they will lose sight. Strike the ears, they will lose sense of space. Strike the throat, they will lose voice. The cadets nodded eagerly, each note making them feel as if victory was in reach. But the silence of the human grew louder than the voice of the teacher, louder than the scratching of pens, louder than the whispers of pride. It was a silence that carried weight. It was a silence that demanded attention. It was a silence that felt like a hidden answer waiting at the end of the lesson. One young cadet could no longer hold his nerves. He whispered too loudly, "He is staring at us. Look at his eyes. They do not move. They do not blink." The others turned quickly, then turned back even faster, their hearts racing, though none of them wished to admit it. They could feel the human's gaze like heat against their scales and skin. The teacher now showed images of alien claws striking glowing red points on the human body, diagrams of victory drawn, as if real battles had already been won. The cadets cheered softly, convinced they now knew the truth of human weakness. But the teacher's voice grew heavy again. "Do not believe this is simple," he said. "Do not forget that every time another species thought they had found a way to kill a human, they discovered too late that the lesson was wrong." Yet the cadets brushed his words aside, drunk with the pride of imagined triumph. The human leaned back in his chair, his arms uncrossing, his hands now resting on the table, his fingers tapping once again, a slow rhythm, steady and sharp, each tap a drumbeat echoing in the chest of every cadet, the sound small yet too loud in the silence between the words of the teacher. The cadets grew restless, their pens slowing, their eyes now moving more toward the human than toward the glowing diagrams. One asked quietly, "Why does he smile?" Another whispered, "Because he knows something we do not know." A third hissed, "Maybe he waits until the lesson ends." The teacher turned toward the human for a brief moment, his yellow eyes narrowing, as if he too felt the weight of the silence, as if he too wondered when the man would finally speak. But the human did not give him that answer, not yet. The cadets began to whisper louder, though they tried to hide it behind their notes. One said, "Perhaps humans only appear weak so that we lower our guard." Another added, "Perhaps their silence is their strength." Another said softly, "Perhaps he waits because he wants to see everything we think we know before he tells us the truth." Their whispers grew more like prayers than boasts now, their arrogance breaking piece by piece under the quiet gaze of the one they thought was weak. The teacher finished his last diagram, showing the human body filled with arrows, red marks, and broken lines. He turned back to the class, his robe rippling, as if alive. He said, "This is the lesson of weakness. This is how you defeat them. Remember it well. For one day, it may save your life." But his words no longer rang like victory. His words rang like warnings that none wished to hear. For every cadet now stared at the human who had not spoken, who had not moved except to breathe, and to tap his fingers, who had not defended his kind, and yet needed no defense. His silence was a shield, his calm was a weapon, his presence alone heavier than all the glowing notes and diagrams. The lesson had been given, the weakness list had been drawn, the strategies had been told, yet the truth of the room lay not in the teacher's glowing screen, but in the quiet power of the silent observer who waited. The classroom grew quiet after the teacher ended his long explanation, the glowing diagrams fading into mist before vanishing completely, leaving only the smooth dark wall behind. The air felt heavy, thicker than before, as if the silence carried weight greater than any words. The cadets sat frozen in their floating chairs, their glowing notes bright in their hands, yet suddenly meaningless, for their eyes no longer rested on the pages nor on the teacher, who now stood still at the front. Their eyes instead returned again and again to the man at the back, the one who had not spoken since the lesson began, the one who waited, the one who listened, the human. Every cadet felt his silence pressing against their hearts. Some tried to look away, but their heads turned back again, as if pulled by invisible force. The man's calm face, his steady breath, his patient eyes, none of it showed fear, none of it showed anger, yet somehow it felt more dangerous than rage. The teacher's long arms folded across his chest, his bright yellow eyes narrowing as he too looked toward the silent man, his robe shifting with faint light. He spoke with a voice heavy and slow. "The lesson is finished," he said. "Now you know their weaknesses. Now you know where they break. Yet still remember my warning. Never believe. They are easy. Never believe. Knowledge is victory alone." But the cadets no longer listened to him. They whispered to one another, their voices low, trembling, not with laughter now, but with unease. One whispered, "He has not denied a single word." Another whispered, "He has not defended his kind, not even once." A third whispered, "Maybe he does not need to defend. Maybe he waits to prove it." The human leaned forward, his chair groaning under his weight. His hands rested flat upon the table, his fingers no longer tapping, only still, his eyes sweeping across the room, one by one meeting the gaze of every cadet. Without blinking, those who met his eyes felt their throats tighten, their pens slipping slightly from their claws, and hands, for the silence was too strong, the calm too sharp. At last one cadet could not hold it inside anymore, a young one with silver scales glowing faintly under the classroom light. He swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he raised them. His voice broke the silence. "Teacher," he said, his words trembling though he tried to sound strong, may I ask the human if these things are true?" The classroom gasped, the air seemed to crackle as every cadet turned toward the silver-scaled one. His bravery, or perhaps his foolishness, now the center of all eyes. The teacher tilted his head slowly, his yellow eyes shifting toward the human at the back, then back to the brave cadet, his voice deep and steady. "You may ask, but be careful of what answer you receive." The silver-scaled cadet nodded, though his hands trembled. He turned his gaze toward the human, his voice small, yet carrying through the silent room. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "Is this really how to kill your kind?" The words hung in the air like sharp blades. No one breathed. No one moved. The teacher stood frozen. The cadets stared wide-eyed, waiting. The human at the back sat silent for a moment longer, his face unreadable. Then slowly he rose from his chair, the sound of wood against floor echoing through the room, louder than thunder, though it was only a simple motion. He stood tall, though smaller than the aliens. His presence filled the room, his calm heavier now than before, his eyes sharp, as if they could cut through the whispers, through the fear, through the arrogance that once lived here. He looked at the silver-scaled cadet who had dared to ask, then at the others, then finally at the teacher. He did not speak. Right away, his silence stretched like a rope pulled tight. Every cadet held breath, every claw gripped page tighter, every wing curled closer, every heart raced faster. The human let the silence grow until it felt unbearable. Then at last, he opened his mouth, his voice low, steady, calm, yet filled with something no one could name. "You have written many words," he said. "You have drawn many lines. You have filled pages with what you believe to be truth. You think you know how to break us, how to silence us, how to kill us." His words slow, clear, like cold water pouring in a fire. The cadets shivered, as if the temperature dropped around them. He stepped forward one pace, only one, yet every cadet leaned back in their chairs, as if pushed by force. His voice did not rise, yet it grew heavier with every word. "You believe our bones are fragile, our hearts soft, our minds simple. But tell me this, if we are so weak, why do your teachers still warn you? Why do your stories still fear us? Why do your worlds still remember our victories?" The cadets froze. None dared to answer. The silver-scaled cadet trembled, his notes glowing in his claws, yet his eyes locked on the human, unable to look away. The human's gaze swept across them again, his voice still calm, but sharper now. "You think silence means fear. You think patience means weakness. You think calm means surrender. But you are wrong. Silence is strength, patience is choice, calm is control," he said. The teacher remained silent now, too. His yellow eyes narrowed, but his long arms lowered, as if he himself waited for the truth he had warned but never spoken. The human stopped in the center of the room, the cadets shrinking back, though. He had not raised a hand, not shown weapon, not shouted threat. He only stood, breathing steady, calm as stone, yet heavy as mountains. The silver-scaled cadet whispered again, his voice shaking, "Do you mean the lesson is wrong? Do you mean we cannot kill your kind?" The human turned his eyes upon him again, his voice quiet, yet sharper than any blade. "The lesson you have been taught is not how to kill us. It is only how to begin dying when you try." The words struck harder than thunder. The cadets gasped. Some dropped their pens, their notes falling into the air like glowing feathers, their hearts pounding, their eyes wide with fear. The silence, after his words, deeper than before. The human did not add more. He did not need to. His gaze alone spoke what his words had left unspoken, the truth that every alien in the room now felt in their bones, the truth that weakness was not what they thought, the truth that they had not studied a prey, but a predator that watched them quietly from the back until the right moment to reply. The The silence in the classroom was so heavy that even the hum of the glowing walls seemed to vanish. The cadets sat frozen in their floating chairs, their notes falling useless from their claws and hands. The teacher stood at the front with his arms stiff and his robe rippling, as if moved by unseen wind. But all eyes were locked on the human, who now stood in the center of the room, his gaze sharp, his voice calm, his presence larger than any of them could have imagined. He looked at the silver-scaled cadet who had asked the question, then at the green-horned one who had boasted of crushing him, then at the blue-scaled one who had laughed, then at the red-skinned one who had shouted, and finally he looked at the teacher, his eyes unblinking, his face unreadable. "You believe weakness is enough to win," he said. "You believe that fragile bones mean easy victory. You believe that soft hearts mean quick death. You believe that lungs that need air mean simple defeat. You believe that because your teacher drew lines on a glowing screen, because your pens filled pages with shining ink, because your pride whispered that you are stronger." The cadets shivered. His voice never rose, yet it filled every corner of the room like a storm without sound. "But you are wrong," he continued. "Our bones break, yet we rise again. Our hearts bleed, yet they burn hotter. Our lungs struggle, yet we run farther. Our skin tears, yet we fight harder. We are not strong because we are unbreakable. We are strong because we do not stop when broken." He stepped closer, his footsteps slow, steady, each one like a hammer, striking the chest of the cadets, who leaned back farther in their chairs. Though he did not touch them, his presence pressed upon them heavier with every word. "You think silence is fear, but silence is choice. You think patience is weakness, but patience is power. You think calm is surrender, but calm is control. We choose when to speak, we choose when to act, we choose when to strike. And when we strike, it is not with weakness, it is with everything." The silver-scaled cadet trembled, his claws clutching the glowing notes. So hard the light bent, his voice cracked. But he forced words out. "If this is true, then why do we hear stories of humans falling? Why do we hear stories of humans defeated?" The human turned his eyes upon him again, sharp like fire, cutting through mist. "Stories are told by those who live," he said. "Those who defeat us tell their tales, but those we defeat never speak again, and their silence is our true story." The teacher shifted his weight, his yellow eyes narrowed, his long arms crossed tighter. Yet he said nothing, for he too felt the truth pressing down in the human's calm voice. The human raised his hand, slowly pointing at the glowing screen. Though it was now blank, "You filled your pages with lines of weakness," he said. "But what you do not see is that every weakness is also a weapon. Bones that break harden stronger hearts, that bleed burn brighter lungs, that struggle breathe deeper skin, that tears learns to endure. We turn wounds into lessons, pain into strength, loss into fire." The cadets stared wide-eyed, some trembling, some clutching their pages, as if the glowing notes could protect them. Yet they all felt the truth sinking into their bones, deeper than fear, heavier than doubt. One cadet with dark wings whispered, without meaning to, "How can we fight something that does not stop?" The words left his mouth like breath stolen by wind. The others heard, and their silence agreed, though their pride tried to hold it back. The human lowered his hand, his voice still calm, yet sharper than before. "You do not fight us to win, you fight us to survive. And even survival is not promised, for when we're pushed, we do not fall back, we push forward. When we're cornered, we do not surrender, we break walls. When we are wounded, we do not cry, we grow stronger." He took another step forward, now only a few paces from the first row of floating chairs, his eyes meeting the green-horned cadet, who had claimed he could crush a human before he could move. The green-horned cadet shook under that gaze, his claws clenching the edges of his chair, his pride broken like glass. The human's words cut deeper. "Now you told yourselves I could be crushed with one strike. Yet I have stood silent through your lesson. I have listened to every boast. I have carried every word. And I am still here, unshaken, untouched, waiting. And now you begin to understand why silence was the loudest reply." The cadets felt their hearts race, their breaths short, as if the human's calm voice stole the air from their lungs. The teacher finally spoke, his voice heavy. "This is why I warned you," he said softly. "This is why arrogance blinds you." His eyes on the cadets, not the human, for even he seemed unwilling to face the steady gaze of the man who stood before them. The human nodded once toward the teacher, then looked back at the cadets. "My silence was not fear," he said. "It was respect. I allowed your teacher to speak. I allowed you to write. I allowed your pride to grow because I wanted you to see the truth with your own eyes. I wanted you to feel strong before I showed you what strength really is." He moved to the table at the front, his hand brushing across the blank screen, the surface glowing faintly under his touch. He spoke again. "You study how to kill us, but you have not studied why you fail, and you will fail, because you mistake breaking for ending, you mistake silence for surrender, you mistake weakness for defeat." The cadets leaned forward, though their hearts screamed to lean back, for they could not stop themselves from listening. Every word chained them closer. His calm voice carried no threat, yet felt heavier than 1,000 weapons. The human turned back to them, now standing tall, his voice clear. "If you ever face a human, remember this: you're not fighting flesh and bone, you're fighting will, you're fighting fire, you are fighting something that does not stop until one of two things happens: either you fall, or we do, and we do not fall easy." The silence after his words roared louder than any shout. The cadets stared, unable to speak, their glowing notes useless, their pride shattered, their fear now real. And the human stood, waiting, his reply not finished, but his truth already carved into their hearts. The classroom was frozen in silence. The glowing walls of the chamber hummed softly. The chairs floated without sound. The air seemed heavier than stone. Yet all of it was nothing compared to the weight that pressed upon the cadets as they stared at the human, who now stood at the front of the class, his presence filling every corner like fire hidden in smoke. The human moved toward the shining board at the center, his steps steady, his expression calm, his eyes sharp like blades. He lifted one hand, and with a slow motion, he wiped away the words that still lingered faintly from the earlier lesson. The lines, the arrows, the diagrams, all vanished under his hand, leaving the surface blank, empty, silent. He picked up the glowing marker that rested on the edge of the board, his grip firm, his movements slow. The cadets leaned forward, unable to stop themselves, their eyes wide, their hearts racing, their bodies trembling in the floating chairs, as if the weight of his silence was crushing them. The human began to write, each letter slow, each line sharp, his hand moving with absolute control. And when he was done, only 3 words glowed bright across the empty board, 3 words that cut deeper than any weapon, 3 words that none of them would ever forget. Never try this. The room felt colder and hotter at the same time. The cadets stared at the glowing words, their breathing heavy, their throats dry, their minds struggling to hold on to pride, but failing with every second. The human turned back to face them, his voice calm, yet filled with power. "You believe knowledge will save you," he said. "You believe weakness will guide you. You believe lessons will protect you. But you forget that what you learn today is nothing compared to what you face tomorrow. Knowledge without truth is a trap, and you have just walked into it." The silver-scaled cadet lowered his head, his claws trembling, his glowing notes falling from his hands as they dissolved into the air like mist. He whispered, without thinking, "How can we fight something that cannot be broken?" The human's gaze turned to him, his eyes steady, his tone quiet but sharp. "You cannot fight what does not surrender. You cannot break what refuses to end. You cannot kill what chooses to rise again and again until you are the one who falls." The greenhorn cadet, who had once laughed loudest, now held his arms across his chest, as if to shield himself from words that felt heavier than steel. He forced his voice out, weak and trembling. "Then why are you here? Why do you sit among us if we cannot defeat you?" The human looked at him, and for a moment silence stretched longer than time. Then he spoke, "I am here not to be your prey. I am here to be your lesson, not the one your teacher planned, but the one you needed to face, because arrogance without truth is death, and pride without respect is ruin." The teacher at the front shifted uneasily, his yellow eyes flickering from the human to his students, his long fingers clutching the edge of his robe, as if he too felt the storm of meaning in every word spoken. He wanted to speak, but he did not, for he knew even his voice would break in the shadow of this moment. The human stepped closer to the first row, his presence heavier than any weapon. His eyes met each cadet one by one, his words slow, measured. "Each of you believes victory is found in striking first, but true victory is found in standing last. Each of you believes strength is found in power, but true strength is found in will. Each of you believes humans are weak because our flesh is fragile, but you forget that spirit is not made of flesh, and spirit does not break." One cadet with dark wings whispered in fear like a prayer, "If even death cannot stop you, then what hope do we have?" The human paused, letting the silence burn the cadets, stared, waiting, their hearts racing, until he finally answered with words that shook them deeper than anything else. You have hope. If you choose not to fight us, you have hope. If you choose to stand beside us, you have hope. If you remember that respect is stronger than pride, and that survival is not found in killing, but in understanding. The words struck harder than any strike, for the cadets had expected threat, but instead they heard warning, not anger, but certainly not rage, but truth. The human turned back to the glowing board, the three words blazing bright, "Never try this." His hand brushed across them once more, but he did not erase them. He left them glowing like fire on stone, permanent, unshakable, undeniable. He spoke again, his voice calm, steady, yet echoing in their hearts. "If one day you face a human, remember these words. Remember this moment. Remember how silence taught you more than sound, how calm cut deeper than noise, how truth weighed heavier than lies. Remember that when you think you are ready to kill us, you will already be too late." The cadets sat frozen, some clutching their chairs, some hiding their trembling hands, some staring wide-eyed, unable to blink their pride, broken, their fear alive, their respect forced into existence by the weight of reality they had never understood until now. The teacher bowed his head, not in shame, but in recognition, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Class is dismissed." But none of the cadets moved, none of them left, none of them could, their eyes still on the human who stood before them, silent, strong, unbroken. His reply, now complete, yet echoing endlessly inside their minds. And as they sat there staring at him, they all knew one truth had carved itself into their souls, the truth that would follow them for the rest of their lives, the truth that no book, no lesson, no teacher could ever erase. The truth that when faced with a human, there was only one warning to remember. Never try this.